Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world. This is part 2 of this episode. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Link in the description.
This episode is brought to you by Founder Catalyst. If you're raising funds and you need to get yourself SCIS and EIS advanced assurance and you need some help with that, then stick around to find out how you can get 5% off of Founder Catalyst's services. Okay, we're back for part 2. I'm here with Ben Borton. If you haven't watched part 1, check it out. It will add a lot of context to what we're talking about. Otherwise, you might be a bit lost or not. Just watch this one. It's up to you. But we were ending... We sort of wrapped up part 1 talking a little bit more specifically about the product and kind of what it does and some of the unique pieces that you've added to it, I guess, in more recent times. And I did say to you, I wanted to delve a bit more into that and also talk about the fundraising journey, because a lot of the audience that watches the show always love to hear about the ups and downs of that and kind of the, maybe some tips and tricks. I don't know. But anyway, so we'll get into that in a moment. But yeah, so just to finish that thought that we were having at the beginning, the piece on the sort of social selling aspect of it was really interesting, because I guess I'm always interested in these, I don't want to say hacks, but sort of, I guess, strategies for creating virality in a product, right? And ways that can be achieved. And it's quite difficult to do more often than not. But it seems like you guys have found a really unique opportunity here in doing that, while also solving additional problems. Like you said, like the idea that people want to have content of these moments of them playing a sport or, having an experience together amongst their friends, but not wanting to disrupt it in order to capture those moments and share them. So that in of itself is solving sort of like an additional sort of societal problem almost there, but still giving them that moment. And then that you said there's a digital real estate opportunity there too. But again, was this something that you kind of, I'm just curious to know, is this something that sort of was in some ways an extraordinarily thought out kind of, always part of the plan type situation? Or is this just really a natural evolution of things based on demand, based on specific use cases, things that sort of just popped up? Like, talk me through that. How did it come about?
Yeah, there's, in the Ping Pod journey, there's kind of a funny version of this where it was part of the plan. It's like, how do you, because you weren't going to have staff on site, how do you create that kind of elevated tech forward experience? The first version to test out, the idea was like, would people want these video replays? I mean, the hypothesis was yes. So literally the initial version of this is we had the security cameras to monitor the spots, and people could press a button and it would just get a timestamp. And then Max would literally go to the security footage and cut a clip of it.
Proper MVP.
That was the MVP was the button. The man behind the button was Max, and he was cutting the videos himself. And very quickly, within 30 days, this was taking up a huge amount of his time. This was cutting videos, and this is like, no, this isn't sustainable. So we have to build a system around it. So we built a whole technology architecture around doing those videos. And some of the principles around that is that taking the friction out. There are other video capture systems that are out there. They tend to be standalone. They're not integrated with the reservation management system. And so having the reservation management, who's on the court or on the table, who's there, they're already kind of in the system. We have a place to deliver that to, both to their email and into kind of the app. So they have a history of all the reservations that they put. So they don't have to go do something else. And you talk about this societal problem. I mean, we really do see this as a societal problem. Is sometimes the sharing comes before the actual having the experience. I think of the sort of, the iconic or emblematic example of this is going to a concert, right?
I was just thinking of the same thing. Yeah.
Great song. Your favorite band is playing this amazing song. It's coming to the end. What do you see? You just see phones. It's kind of an infinity mirror. It's a really modern image, right? Is that looking up at the stage, you see the stage kind of reflected back to you in everybody's phones. And I always have this thought. It's like, well, you're sort of missing the moment, right? You're kind of a little bit less in it because you're capturing it in order to kind of share it. So that feels a little backwards to us. And so we always wanted this system where it's tech in service of the game, right? So nobody, you don't have to do anything until something great happens, right? So imagine like the great moment happened and you can go back and press the button and say, I wanted that to be captured. And that's what we have, right? And you think of that versus a world where you don't have that, and you have that kind of amazing moment that happens, amazing shot, and you're looking around and you say, did anybody see that?
Right.
Did it happen? You wanted everybody to see it, but you didn't know it was going to happen. So taking that friction out is incredibly important. We actually have a patent pending on this whole concept of user initiated replay, whether it's pressing a button or waving, but it's user initiated, not some AI going in after the fact and telling you what.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Does AI have a place in that? Because of could it in some way interpret, but it's not really at a place of sophistication where it can interpret what makes a funny moment. I mean, to some degree, but really not very well. What makes it an amazing. It doesn't have the data to interpret that.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting there relatively quickly, but it's also expensive to do that with video. So, and I think there is a level of agency as well that people like. People like choosing their own moments.
Yep.
And the clubs that this has really taken hold in, it becomes part of the moment, is like running over the button. You get like the replay dance, and you'll get people yelling out, hit the replay, capture that, right?
Yeah,
and it's there's nothing that makes us feel better like when you get that. So it becomes part of the culture of the club. Is you have this technology, people know it, and they're like, we gotta get that.
It's funny. It makes me think of sort of video game streamers when they play a video game and maybe some insane thing happens in the video game, and they'll say to their editors, like, we need to clip that, like, that was insane. It's that kind of thing. Yeah, clip it, versus like an AI just going through your content and saying, we think that you had a great play here, and then also you just create another problem, which is that you have AI creating galleries of content for you to decide yes, no, yeah, and then it's just an added burden on the user experience, which is, now I need to somehow go through this catalog of content and decide whether or not it's good or bad, versus just I just wanted that one thing, and probably it not meeting expectations anyway. Like, well, what about that cool moment that you missed it, or you've cut out the context and so on. So I totally get it. It makes sense to put the user at the forefront of that decision making process.
Yeah. So I mean, you mentioned virality. So if you think of what is the natural form of social media? What is kind of the natural currency of social media? Well, one of them is short form video, right? So we love the fact that the product itself is effectively constantly producing short form clips that are kind of perfect for social media. And we're seeing individual players kind of share their moments. That's great if you're a club, right? If somebody is, it's almost... it's like the best form of word of mouth.
Yeah.
It's I could tell my friends that I'm having a great time here, or I could show them, here I am having a great time in this facility. What's better from kind of an advertising standpoint,
so
right?
It provides virality opportunities, not only for the client that you're serving, so that club, but also for the underlying product, potentially for other clubs seeing that and maybe getting FOMO for wanting that sort of experience for their customers.
100%. I mean, we see this we always see ourselves as having two customers. We get paid by the clubs, but ultimately our customer is also the player, because the clubs only succeed insofar as we create an amazing experience for those players. And in a perfect world, like if we do this really, really well and we execute really, really well, if you're a club that doesn't have PodPlay, I would like it if your players show up and they're like, why don't you have this? I'm seeing this all over the place. I see these kind of, this becomes my expectation that this is part of the experience of playing pickleball or playing table tennis. And that's a good vision of the future, when you have the end customers are actually the ones. It's not me selling a club. It's the end customer saying, hey, you should be over here because this is the experience we want.
To step away from the specifics of PodPlay for a second, and before we get onto the sort of fundraising journey that you guys have been on, you on a sort of personal / professional level, what do you enjoy most about the work that you do now with PodPlay, and what Yeah, I mean, what is it about the work that gets you out of bed and that gets you excited, and do you feel like it's a good match for your skill set? Are you able to? Is it getting the most out of the that background that you talked about, that very interesting journey that you took? I mean, yeah, I'm just curious to know what.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the most exciting thing I've ever worked on. It feels like the best match for my skill set. It feels like a culmination of a bunch of things that I've worked on. In terms of what's most exciting about it is the mission itself. And we sometimes phrase the mission as we want to increase the amount of fun being had in the world.
Nice.
It's pretty unassailable, right?
Yeah.
My previous firm, I was doing something innovative, putting private funds on the blockchain. Try explaining that to your kids, though. It's like, their eyes glaze over. Whereas my kids are wearing, they're wearing my swag. They go play ping pong. They go play pool. They were up at the dog wash with me this weekend. They love it. They're all in on kind of what we're doing because it's fun. They went to camp at Ping Pod last summer. They're getting really good at table tennis, and they have a lot of fun with it. So it's kind of number one, and that's an invaluable thing for a business, both in terms of being a magnet for good people, which you need as a startup. We're never going to outbid Google or Apple for somebody, but we can provide a mission that is amazing. And for people who that mission resonates with, it's like it's a beacon or a magnet that kind of draws people in. It's the same thing for investors, right? There's a certain type of investor who is looking to do things that are really substantially like changing consumer behavior. And I think that's the second aspect of me. I mean, I've always been most interested in the 0 to 1 moment of doing something new in the world that changes how people think about it. My two great loves are starting businesses and writing. My wife's a novelist, and I think these things are, more similar than a lot of people do. I think in the world of novels.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
You're taking an idea from your head, you're putting it down on paper, you try it in a way, you need to do it in a way that creates an emotional connection with people. Over here, you have an idea about, the world looks like this today. We want it to look like that. We want to give that idea a reality. And it's a little less lonely than writing a novel because you're doing it with a team. But in essence, it's kind of the same act, right? It's that act of idea to giving something a reality in the world. And there's something really special about, putting something out there. I think we may cross, 600,000 players that are using the platform this month.
That's amazing.
That's a lot. I think by the end of the year, it's, it'll easily be over 1 million. And now you're touching a lot of people's lives. And that is really, really, really gratifying. And you're doing it in a way that, it's not just fun. Most of the things that we're supporting are, they're active, they're social, they're healthy. And in a post-pandemic world, these things have become more and more important. And I think that the last leg of it that's interesting is, how this model fits with the world we live in. If you think about how do you buy goods? Do you buy from Amazon? Do you buy, so much of the stuff just arrives at your apartment, right? That maybe 20 years ago, you would go out and buy in a shop. So what's the highest and best use of those shops now? And what is the thing that you cannot buy on Amazon? Well, you'll never be able to buy a game of pickleball or a game of table tennis on Amazon, right? So maybe that's the thing that should be in these kind of physical spaces, right? That the physical spaces get repurposed from the world of goods to the world of experiences. And if we can kind of, put a business model and a set of technology out there that allows people to deliver that experience that matches the expectations of the consumer, the modern consumer, in a profitable fashion, right? It's not just, it has to be profitable,
of course,
right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there's these two pieces to that statement. It's like, okay, I can create the magic experience, but if I create the magic experience and it's so expensive that nobody can use it, then that's not that useful. But if I can create the magical experience that is also allows for those kind of experiences to be delivered profitably, then I've done something that's really, really, really great. So that's what gets me excited in the morning. As it relates to kind of my background, we haven't talked that much about our go-to-market motion, but our go-to-market motion is 100% content-based. So to date, I'm the only salesperson. We have not hired a sales team, so we've gotten to kind of $1.5 million in contracted ARR with no sales team. And I wear a bunch of other hats as well. And we've been able to do that because we have a really great content strategy. There's kind of 4 legs to it. The first is long form blogs. So we write really information rich blogs that are based on our experience running clubs. So people do case studies and things like that, but it's hard to share data about your underlying clients where we run the clubs. So we're happy to kind of be the open book and say, okay, this was our experience. Here's mistakes we made. Here's data that kind of proves this. So those have been, really, really well received by the marketplace. The second layer is we do long form video, and we've partnered with a woman named Caitlin Kerr, who is a big personality in the pickleball space. She's one of the co-owners of the Las Vegas Night Owls with Tom Brady and Kim Clijsters, hosts a lot of the PPA and MLP events. Those are the pro events for pickleball. She has a podcast called Talk Pickle to Me that's amazing. Recommend everybody listen to it. She's generally just like the funnest person in pickleball. And that was why we wanted to partner with her as kind of, the avatar for our business. So we do a long form series with her called The Joy of Pickleball, where we send her out to kind of one of our client clubs every quarter, and she interviews the founders and she interviews customers. There's usually some cool like meet cute stories. She plays pickleball with a bunch of people. She plays some deeper challenge match. So there's some fun competition. What you end up with is, a 10 or 11 minute cut that is a visual representation of like, what are all the good things about pickleball. And there's a reason why we called it The Joy of Pickleball. And, it's not just a video case study of PodPlay, right? We think PodPlay in the background, it's technology in the service of this other thing, which is joy and fun and human stories and human connection. So that's kind of a second form. And obviously we chop those things up into smaller reels that can be, spread out over the course of a quarter. The third leg we've already talked about is just this replay content that's coming out of the system. So, individual players share these things, clubs are doing kind of compilations. And then we at the PodPlay level, we're taking the best stuff and amplifying it for our clients. So we do one of those a week. We're now doing kind of compilations where we, do a top 5 or a top 10, and we have Caitlin do voiceover on those. And some of these things are really just starting to kind of like go viral on social media. We had one in the fourth quarter that got 3 million views. Wow. Gold for kind of a replay. And as you said, it's also every one of those is supporting our customers, but it's also supporting us, because the more those things get out there in the world, the more people are aware of what PodPlay does. And then the fourth piece is we do like doing podcasts like this, partly because we like talking to people about you, but we also end up with a whole bunch of content that is a way. I see podcasts as a way of doing relationships at scale. So you think about like what scales in the world today. Well, software scales, content scales, and this is a form of doing relationships at scale. So that if people listen to these things, they come back and they arrive at a call with you, and you probably get this, right? People show up to a call with you. They kind of know Greg. They kind of know some of the questions that Greg might ask. They know the style of his conversation.
For better or for worse, yeah.
For better or for worse, And I mean, it's the same thing with me, right? Yeah. It's, people have a sense of kind of who I am. So as that relates to kind of a go-to-market strategy, we're just trying to have the best product and the best content and not kind of put a whole bunch of outbound into the world. So the people that are finding us are generally finding us kind of through our content. They tend to be very motivated. They tend to already know what we're doing. So it's ended up with this very, very efficient go-to-market motion, which has allowed us to continue to invest in the R&D side, which extends the product lead. So there's a flywheel here at some point we will have to build a sales team. And, one of the questions is, when do we do that? But I do think in the world that we live in, you can go a lot farther with founder-led sales than you could in the past. AI tools help in that regard. The admin burden of doing kind of sales calls has gone dramatically down. And the scale of the internet, 10 people read a blog, 10 million people read a blog, same amount of work. To me. So we are very focused on those aspects that scale.
And like I said, even from the content production standpoint, the AI tools that are available to really make that workflow just so much more manageable for a small team in of itself is incredible too. There's no excuse to these days to not be able to lead a go-to-market strategy with a content-led approach there as well. Yeah, it's interesting. But the thing is, though, you mentioned all of that, but there's a piece that I felt that was kind of noticeably missing, which is you're kind of burying the lead a little bit in that content of the product proper, because you're highlighting the partnerships and the clients and all that sort of stuff. But of course, like you said, you're never going to be overtly in people's face about the product there. It's really just it's a content marketing strategy. You never would. So do you find that, or have you found that quite often there's a need then to make up for that in conversations that might come in? It's like, okay, well, we know vaguely about you, but we don't know much about you, because you're bearing the lead a little bit within the content that people are coming to you, and then you have to kind of make up for it with the education side of things. Like, this is actually how a product works. Or is that not so much of an issue? You find that people tend to sort of self-serve in that regard. They kind of go down the rabbit hole, teach themselves, and by the time you're speaking to them, they're kind of caught up on stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's always some level of education, but what you really want is people to kind of understand what that experience looks like, right? And then, it's not going to be as exciting to have a piece of content where you talk about the mechanics.
Yeah.
I can do that in a demo.
Right.
Whereas, I want that piece of content to be like, what is the experience that we're creating for those end customers? And, I look at what are companies that we all admire from a branding standpoint, right? Nike, just do it. Does that have anything to do with shoes? Do you know anything about kind of the mechanics of shoes? No. Apple, think different. There's nothing about devices, right? It's about like, what is the experience? What is the mission? And I want our mission to be about fun, that this is technology in the service of fun. So that's the kind of message that I want to put out there. Take something like video replays. It's pretty obvious that this is a PodPlay replay that's out there. Like, people know that it's a PodPlay replay. So it's perfect if somebody shows up to call. It's like, how do you do that?
Raising investment is painful enough without getting bogged down in legal costs. That's why I'm using Founder Catalyst, today's sponsor for Peer, my startup's pre-seed raise. We've been lucky enough to have Sam, the CEO of Founder Catalyst, on the show before. Go and check out that episode. Their funding round service offers the most cost-effective way to produce funding round legals in the UK. It's just £1,495 excluding VAT, with no monthly fees or hidden extras, no matter how much you're raising. One Founder Catalyst customer recently raised 2.7 million and saved around £10,000 compared to the next option. If you're looking for SEIS, EIS Advanced Assurance, they've got a 100% success rate over the last 3 years. Founder Catalyst is built by founders for founders, and from my own experience, I can't recommend them enough. You can scan the QR code on the screen around here somewhere or around there somewhere, I don't know, or use the link in the description for 5% off. Thank you to Founder Catalyst for sponsoring this episode. Now back to it.
How do you capture that? I want that video capture. I see what you're doing with scoreboards. We do some videos as well that are. I mean, you're basically mixing in kind of the how-to, particularly with the physical pieces. So like when we sent Caitlin out, she's always showing how to press the button and how to set up the scoreboard. And it's layered in there, but we don't want it to be the primary thing.
It needs to have value in of itself as a piece of content that can entertain, that can excite, that can do those things. Yeah.
And the beauty of the product as well is that, I mean, my absolute favorite inbound is when I get a demo request. It's like, hey, I played at XYZ club. I love the experience. Let's get on a call.
Right.
We literally
that's pretty much a closed deal before you even start, really, I suppose, in that scenario.
Yeah,
right?
It's great. We had an inbound this weekend from a public company CEO who played at one of our clubs and reached out and said, "Are you guys looking for investment?" I'm like, that's the best, right? He had the experience. The experience was intuitive, kind of loved it. And he felt compelled to reach out. That's amazing.
Okay, well, look, let's talk about overnight success, right? So,
Yeah.
it's never overnight, and I wanted to pick your brains on the kind of fundraising journey of this, which obviously is always intertwined with every other aspect of the journey. But yeah, I mean, I guess from your perspective and your particular vantage point within the company, how has that panned out in terms of, because you mentioned some of the early conversations about investment, talking about the what it means to, for example, to take VC money versus not, and so on. But just from those earlier stages, those earlier days that you were involved with that, how did the investment come about and really shape the direction of the company? And do you feel that actually things could have come to a similar sort of state with the company without that, like just with organic growth, with bootstrapping?
The bootstrapping version of this would have gone way, way, way slower. And there is a question whether we would have been in a position to launch PodPlay
Right.
if we went that route. There's certainly a version of the world where we, put together a handful of ping pods, reinvested kind of the profitability in kind of the next location. It would have gone much, much slower. And it's questionable whether we would have been in a position to go after the pickleball opportunity. And there's a timing aspect to that, right? That market is growing really, really rapidly. And if you're launching a vertical SaaS business, the best possible kind of setup is to align yourself with a greenfield opportunity. It's great to kind of rip and replace things that are already there, but it's, you're talking about the system that people use to interact with their customers, how they take payments. It's a non-trivial thing to switch systems. Frankly, I've been surprised how many switchers we've gotten. I thought we would spend 2 to 3 years going after greenfield opportunities, and then people would would prove out how much better the experience was, and then we'd start to see migrations. We've actually migrated, a whole host of clubs from some of our competitors, which is super, super exciting. It's a great indication of product market fit if people are willing to kind of go through the pain of doing a migration. I don't think you can be just marginally better in order for that to happen. It has to be, really something that's substantially better. So yeah, there is a bootstrapped version of the world, but I don't know if we would have been able to get to PodPlay. And PodPlay is it's the $1 billion business here, right? It is the really big possible idea. So the short term or short to medium term is, can we win the pickleball market? We think that's a pretty substantial market. We think it's winner take most. Generally, these markets tend to kind of end with one or two main providers. We think we're really well positioned to kind of be the winning platform in that space, but the ambitions are much bigger than that. As I mentioned, there's two ways that you kind of expand from that. One is by going to adjacent verticals, and I mean, even today, obviously, we serve table tennis, we're serving pool, we've got a padel client, we've got volleyball, we've got baseball, we've got cricket in the UK. We've got golf sims, we've got the dog wash. There's a lot of experiences that are already on the platform. We're not going and seeking those out. They are actually finding us. And we're trying not to do custom work for those use cases. So if it kind of fits in our current framework, we're happy to kind of move down that path. But really the focus and kind of the resources are focused on that pickleball market. So if you think of a vertical SaaS business, right, there's two ways that you grow. It's number of locations, and it's what's the average contract value. We have, I think, amongst our competitors, we have the highest average contract value because we do these premium features, the replays, the scoreboards, the autonomous aspects that act as a labor replacement. So it's a higher ACV than our competitors. But there is, how do you drive that ACV up over time? It's by providing return on that investment. And can we add products to that? I mean, I think most vertical SaaS businesses start with some kind of, landing point, control point, and then you add more things that you can do, because generally these businesses, they don't want to have an infinite number of tech providers. They want as many things in that core system as possible. So one of the things we're working on in 2025 that we're super excited about, and I guess, again, it's a natural sort of evolution of the product, is ads on those monitors that we put up. So every monitor that we install for a club is a nice piece of digital real estate. So we've started, in some cases, serving, it says presented by before you get the instant replay, right? So you get a nice sponsor logo there. We're also putting sponsor logos on some of the the digital form of those replays, so they travel with social media. So today, that's it's relatively crude, right? We do that one per club. Imagine a world in the future where it could be different logo for different courts, different times of day, different days of the week. You're just like slicing and dicing this. And so you should be serving up the logo for the sandwich shop if it's noon, right? It's lunchtime, right? It should be. So there's also kind of like this time aspect to it. So, we're just like scratching the surface on that side. And I think we can deliver a ton more value to the clubs through that. So yeah, those are the two vectors. Like, can we create more verticals, and can we kind of add products? In order to do that, it requires some capital.
Of course.
So I think we've signed up for that. Is
what you're in for now?
Yeah, I mean, like the bootstrap version of it is, it's go slower. But if you're in win the market mode, you should be kind of committing resources to win the market, and you're going to need a little help on kind of the capital side for that.
And so how did those, you touched on it briefly in part one, but how did those early conversations go with investors? You mentioned there was a bit of skepticism early on from investors on would people do it, basically? Why would we replace employees and things like that? But yeah, broadly speaking, was that a very common sort of sentiment amongst investors? And if so, how did you handle that as an objection? And yeah, were you just sort of actively, as a unit of co-founders, going out and attacking investors en masse, or were you a bit more strategic given certain contacts and so on? Just paint me a picture there.
Yeah, so if you think of the pre-seed round, it was almost entirely like friends and family, right? Including myself. I was one of the friends
right,
of the firm, and kind of an early advisor. And everybody in that initial one was like, hey, interesting idea here. Let's put a little bit of money behind this. Let's get a first location open. This enough money to get that first location, proof of concept. Now we have something that we can go out and kind of tackle those conversations with. Fortunately, that first location was very, very successful. And in the face of the pandemic, right? And that was pretty special, because a lot of physical businesses did horribly during that period. There was just like a very bad period for those. So that I think, while initially when the pandemic hit, it's like, oh my God, we just opened and then this, 1 month later. But in retrospect, it was actually really great for the business, because it proved the value of operating without staff and operating from a technologically enabled standpoint.
Well, it showed the resilience of the model, essentially, didn't it?
Showed the resilience of the model. I mean, it did very well during a very, very difficult period. So that fueled kind of the next round of financing, which was a seed round where we brought some more people in. That was the first institutional capital that came in and allowed us to take it to kind of multiple locations. Again, did quite well with that, and then did a Series A round in early 2022. That was led by Sequoia Heritage. They ultimately joined the board at that point. And, that money was like, can this model be scaled? Can it be scaled beyond New York? Can it be scaled? Do we have a model here that we can take to, it's not just a handful of these things and kind of a family business, something that we can take and really scale it. And if we do that, then we have kind of the proof point that we need to launch PodPlay, which was sort of the next leg. And we raised a little bit more money in an extension round in 2023, once we launched PodPlay, to kind of put a little bit more money behind that and kind of go after that opportunity in the pickleball space. I mean, I'll say today, in terms of conversations with investors, both of these businesses sit under the same roof. Some people understand that progression, but there are people some investors who think those two businesses shouldn't belong under the same roof. You have one that, even though it's tech enabled, it's a four-wall business, it's got real estate involved, there's leases. This is a tech business. It's a vertical SaaS business. They're separate things. And there's, there may be a path of the world where we separate these things over time. So I would say the conversations today, the challenge is getting people to understand the path from this to this. We think that it's a really unique path and part of our competitive advantage. If you're going to build digital tools to manage physical spaces, there's no better way to learn how to do it than manage physical spaces with technology. And we don't think that anybody will repeat that path. So if your pitch to a VC is, hey, give me $10 million in 5 years to build out a bunch of four-wall businesses as the basis for a vertical SaaS business, I don't think anybody else is going to follow that path. So we think that's very unique. It's a competitive advantage. It puts us on a really interesting footing with with the clubs that we work with. They tend to see us more as a peer than as a pure vendor. They don't see us as competitive because we're in a different sport than they are. So that really changes kind of the nature of that relationship in a special sort of a way. And I think you see with a lot of vertical SaaS businesses that the founders.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
Came from a standpoint of like solve your own problem, right? And there is something very unique in particular about the domain expertise that comes with that. That I don't think is replicable by just throw a bunch of software resources at it. So yeah, I think if you say, obviously there's always another version of the world that could have happened, and we don't get to play those, but we're really happy with the path that we've taken. I think that, the challenge today is like talking about two businesses under the same roof and having that be kind of a cohesive narrative. And we're in this transition where PodPlay is, PingPod is the business that came first. It's technically bigger from kind of a revenue standpoint at this point, but the growth engine is PodPlay. And that is the potentially very, very large platform. Whereas, PingPod becomes a subset of that, right? It's table tennis is one market of many. We think we can be kind of the dominant brand within table tennis. And, I think if we do a good job there, then PingPod becomes synonymous with ping pong. Sort of like Kleenex being the name. We want to be the Kleenex of ping pong.
Well, what is
again,
Kleenex?
That market's only so big.
Or maybe not appropriate to finish that thought. What is? I was going to ask what is Kleenex synonymous with, but let's not go there.
Well, it's synonymous with tissue.
Maybe okay. There you go. Good. Or Hoover, right? We say Hoover instead of vacuum cleaner. It makes a lot of sense. I do want to ask before I let you go, because we're running out of time. Very briefly, can you share any, to put you on the spot a little bit, can you share any mistakes that you guys have made that you're just like, in retrospect, you feel, well, that we could get a kick out of and maybe laugh about a little bit too, but also might be kind of valuable learning moments for everyone else as they maybe were for you guys?
Yeah, I would say the biggest mistakes were around, we optimized in the early days and as we sort of went to build out kind of the number of stores, we thought it was very important to have location, right? It's like, hey, we're driving down the labor costs. So location is really, really important. One of the benefits that we're going to get is kind of location. One of the things you learn about building physical spaces is, if we had to do it now, we would take less from a location standpoint in exchange for not having to do complicated build outs. So one of the biggest lessons is you don't want to do plumbing. You don't want to do HVAC. Right. These are expensive things that take a long time. So they're expensive. You need to have infinite number of permits that are associated with them. And they take a long time. So, the two factors that drive kind of the return on investment for these locations is how much CapEx did you put in, and then how fast can you get to revenue? And it really impacts both of those. So if you can find a box that doesn't require that level of structural work, we can kind of build that out for, much, much cheaper than a space where we have to kind of do the build out. And at the same time, we've had locations that we got open in 6 weeks, and we had other ones that took 12 months. And, we see this with kind of the end PodPlay clients as well. If you're going to build something from the ground up, it's going to take a long time. It's going to be purpose built. It's going to be amazing. It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a long time. So, learning to think more closely about those trade-offs, I think, if we've made mistakes, those have been some of the mistakes that we would kind of do differently if we had to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't really considered that. I mean, yeah, do you feel like that you guys have got it down to a bit of a fine art now when it comes to opening that in those terms of choosing the right locations, but also just getting together all of the moving pieces to make sure that things are come together quickly, and then you can open within a certain time frame? Do you think you've got there now, or is there still a bit of work to do there?
Yeah, I mean, you can always continue to improve. We are, with the operating business, the path forward, we're now franchising, so we're not building new.
That was going to be my next
locations.
question, right? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, so these are learnings that we're passing on to the franchisees, and we're sort of requiring them to kind of meet certain characteristics. Say, hey, we want you to be really successful. You should do these things. You should learn from some of what we've learned along the way in choosing your location, seeing kind of the amount of work that you need to do on that. So those are become selection criteria from kind of a site selection standpoint. We always have sign off from a franchising standpoint. So I'd say that knowledge is being passed on to the franchisees. So as far as PingPod, the operating business, is concerned, the path forward there is franchising. So we don't want to build new kind of corporate stores. And then there are other interesting places where we can do partnerships. I would say, call it a space within a space model that we're exploring with a bunch of kind of real estate operators who have the characteristic of that is basically I have a space that's a cost center that I would love for that. It's either underutilized or unutilized. And, we could turn that into something that is a broader amenity for whatever the building is and generate revenue. So there's a really great opportunity if you can kind of solve that problem. So we can take the labor arbitrage that we've developed with this model and kind of turn that into a real estate arbitrage that can create a win-win situation. So those are the two things that we're focused on with the operating company.
I love the idea of that second model, space within a space, because that is, I mean, especially in the UK right now with some of the financial issues that some cities are having, some towns are having. They're having to close a lot of places down. I mean, a great example of that is locally to me. The big leisure centre here had to close down for a short period. It was recently sold to, it was public property, and it's now been sold into the private sector. And it has the big public swimming pool in it. They're having to close that down. There's a lot of that sort of stuff going on where local governments are really having to trim the fat of these certain bits and pieces that they own in order to find cost-saving measures, basically. And there's definitely opportunities for the private sectors to come in and offer these kinds of, new innovative business models that still keep these leisure opportunities and activities open, but in a more cost-effective way, and can even drive revenue and so on. So I can totally see how that can be desirable. And we even had a opposite to me, actually. Now it's shut down, but there was a big cinema complex across the road from me, and it shut down. It's now a shop that's awful, but and it shut down because it wasn't making enough money. And I remember having conversations with people locally about that. And originally there were some ideas of, adding arcades and adding this and adding that, but every business model they come up with just, it just doesn't quite do it. And I feel like if they had something like this, because this was going back a few years ago now, if they had something like this as a viable option, it would have opened up people's eyes to maybe save their business, right? As well as, to work for businesses that are already okay, but maybe looking for ideas of expansion. So I think it's a great concept. And of course, the franchising thing just feels like a very natural and logical progression.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, we've had hundreds of inbound requests to franchise the concept. It's very attractive to franchisees because it's not a huge kind of upfront investment. You don't have to manage a staff of 20 like a restaurant or something like that. So it's very limited from kind of a staffing standpoint. And then you have a population of people who are like owner operators who really are interested in the activity itself. I mean, it's I want to be in a fun business. So if you have one that has good economics, relatively smaller kind of entry point, and your end product is fun, that's a pretty good proposition. It's also, from a table tennis standpoint, we're a if you're interested in doing a table tennis business, we're one of one from kind of a franchise concept.
Right.
There's a gazillion restaurants that you could franchise. There's a ton of, yoga concepts but there's one table tennis concept, which is us. So we're pretty bullish on this from a franchise model.
And it's a plan to do the same thing with the pool concept too, or the billiards concept too?
If we're going to start with the table tennis,
if it
goes well, then we basically develop a playbook, and you could do exactly the same thing with the billiards.
Excellent. And just really quickly before I let you go again, so the same question in regards to PodPlay. What were some of the mistakes you maybe made there, especially since that big funding round that kind of led to going to market with that?
I would say mistakes, and these are kind of like natural mistakes as you move from searching for opportunity to the transition from that to it's basically saying yes to saying no. So mistakes we made were, in the early days, you want to just bring in as many clients as possible. So you say yes to a lot of things. You say yes to a lot of feature requests, and you end up with your roadmap can kind of expand. And to a certain extent, you can lose control of the right way to do your roadmap is there's a correct sequencing to kind of create the most cohesive product and the most cohesive user experience. And the best way to do that is not just respond to every request that comes in. But in the early days, when you're looking to win business, tend to say yes. So there's a few things we said yes to that, we, if we had to go back and do it again, we'd say, hey, maybe this wasn't the right time to kind of do this feature. We tend to look at feature requests that come in terms of, are they applicable across the whole platform? So are they useful to everybody? How much do they move the needle? And the three vectors are user experience, both kind of staff and customer. Does it drive new revenue, or does it decrease costs? I mean, those are kind of the three things we're always looking at. Does it really move the needle there? And then how much of a lift is it? And trying to balance those things. Those are the three factors that go into what should be your stack rank priorities. I think we're pretty good about being aggressive about prioritization. But you try and strike the balance between that and kind of keeping all the customers happy. So there's a challenge there.
It is a constant balance to be had, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you being forthright, transparent about that. And it's interesting and very useful to know, but I'm going to have to let you go because we've run out of time and you're a busy guy. You've got inbound sales demos to take care of. But listen, man, I really appreciate you taking the time talking to me about this. It was really exciting. The story is, really great. And I'm just looking forward to seeing where it all goes. All I have to say is thank you so much again. Really appreciate it. And good luck with everything. We'll hopefully keep in touch, and I'll be cheering you on, as I do with all of the founders that I speak with on this show, because it's really great to see all come together, and I wish you all the best success.
Great. Really appreciate you having me on.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening and or watching. Please like and subscribe. Or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.